At a time when unemployment in Hong Kong's industrial sector stands at 30% and 20% of its factory space is lying idle, more than 20,000 factories in Guangdong province, employing some 2 million Chinese workers, are producing goods for re-export through Hong Kong. A large portion consists of garments. Jitigang is a small village in the hills of Dongguan. Before the coming of economic reforms, the 1,200 villagers lived off their rice and sugarcane plantations. Huang Rengui, an old villager who once worked in the fields, now finds himself manager of a Hong Kong-owned sweater factory. The accounting, warehousing and administrative staff at the factory were all farmers, including his son, who now handles customs procedures. The sweater factory is jointly owned by two brothers, Wong Ting-ka and Wong Pui-kun. Hong Kong had been the base of their manufacturing operation until 1980, when they started moving the production lines to Dongguan. They picked Jitigang because it was their hometown. In the early days, the village government set aside the ancestral temple as their workshop. After the two factory buildings were completed, the temple was turned into a warehouse. Recently, the Wong brothers constructed another building along with staff quarters in a so-called joint venture with the village government. In fact, it was the Hong Kong party which put up all the money. The local government only supplied the land. The Wong brothers also operate another two factories set up under a compensation trade arrangement. Local staff are responsible for the day-to-day running of the factory. The Wong brothers spend most of the time in Hong Kong, visiting only on weekends to inspect both factory and goods. Since the sweater factory opened in Jitigang, many villages have seized the opportunity to become independent business operators. Every day at lunchtime, hawkers put up their stalls to serve the factory's workers. Many villagers agree that the factory has given the local economy a new lease of life. When it's time for the autumn harvest, both Huang and his son have to go back to the fields after work. Huang says that in the past, when everyone lived off his 2 acres of farmland, part of the harvest had to go to the state. Today, with most of them working in the factory, they make cash payments to the state instead. Wang Lu Xiang, another villager, gave away most of his farmland several years ago to work as a driver at the factory. He makes 700 yuan a month now, and has even started a small workshop at home, spinning yarn for the factory.
一個月可以賺到幾多錢啊？
而家正常嗰啲3000蚊都有啊。
咁啊幾好喎，即係。
都幾好啦，都好過做種田啊啲嗰啲啦，嗰啲又賺唔到咩錢嗰啲啊，即係做工業係好過做農業嘅。
Far removed from major roads and railways, the town of Donggang in central Dongguan has always been relatively poor. The local government pooled its resources 6 years ago to develop the roads nearby.
我哋覺得咧就跟住要發展咧，交通要發展啊，所以我哋咧就首先咧就把呢條主街道咧就搞去36米嘅，係85年開始搞。咁搞咗條主街道之後咧，我哋要同出邊咧即係同嗰啲主幹線要有直接聯繫，所以開咗呢條工業大道。
總共投資咗幾多錢啊？
即係呢幾年嘅投資咗咧就有幾千萬啦。
Improved roads have succeeded in attracting investments from Hong Kong, and the town government now has the money for its own office. The town secretary and mayor can also afford to ride in European cars.
依家工廠咧就辦咗200幾家，原來咧就好少啦，開放前即係3幾家，依家咧就200多家。依家咧就銀行嘅存款咧有比較多，依家1億6千幾萬存款。
Dongguan has become a favorite for Hong Kong investors, ranking second only to Shenzhen in terms of investment. Out of 15 industrial processing and assembly categories, garments have attracted the most interest. There are more than 1,200 garment processing factories in the area. In 1991, processing fees reached 465 million Hong Kong dollars, accounting for 1/4 of the total. Apart from a small percentage which is sold in Hong Kong or exported under Chinese quota, most of the garments from these factories are exported using Hong Kong quota. In the town of Donggang, Hong Kong manufacturers have set up more than 50 garment factories. One of these specializes in designer label suits. Factory representative Mr. Tam recalls that 3 years ago, his company invested only 4 million Hong Kong dollars in this 3-story building and production equipment. He says not only are factory rents low, but the supply of labor is endless.
呢度工人咧就都幾聽話，照計就即係如果做咗時日咧長咗咧，一樣變為熟練工人嘅，一樣質素都差唔多嘅。
即係同香港嘅冇分別。
冇分別。
但係人工就
比較平啲咯。
即係大概係幾多啊？嗰個倍平咗好平。
大概俾幾多啊？係啊。都有10倍，超過10倍。
Some products from branch factories in Donggang end up being sold in Hong Kong, and these do not bear country of origin markings. The rest is exported. According to Mr. Tam, overseas buyers know the products are made in China.
價錢平啲，佢可以接受到嘅應該。
即係反而話，如果香港嘅價錢，佢哋未必接受得到喎。
香港價錢佢就係嫌貴，然後即係準許你話喺中國製造啦咁樣。佢主要就可能價錢貴嘅問題啦。
有部分車間咧，佢哋唔係幾夠貨做啊。大家呢講呢。
It was problems over pricing that made Wong Ting Ka and Wong Pui Quin move their sweater production lines to Jidigang. Their small factory in Hong Kong used to employ as many as 80 people, but since the move, only 10 workers have remained.
可能我哋呢個行業咧就比較嗰啲工價或者追求唔到其他行業嘅工價。咁能夠俾得起工人嘅工價咧，就唔夠第二個行業去競爭。咁所以我哋請嘅工人咧越請越少。
喺大陸設廠係咪都係一個必然嘅趨勢咧？
如果響接單嗰方面，如果嗰個工價唔能夠改善嘅話，呢個嘅趨勢都係好必要。因為接唔到高嘅工價，就唔能夠請到比如香港嘅工人就請唔起咁解。
There's plenty of low-cost labor in Dongguan, most of it coming from other Chinese provinces. With a population of just 1.3 million, Dongguan has seen an influx of some 800,000 out-province workers. The greatest strength of the area seems to be its large labor pool, which allows for an extra shift at any time.
香港以前都有廠啊，但係香港嚟講咧就比較要求高啲嘅，我知。佢即係話冇乜規律性，一定要返嘅加班嘅。就呢度咧就比較即係規律啲咯。就通常嗰個工人咧都想揾錢，佢都想加班。
多唔多即係加班嘅呢度可以？
加班有喎，
枕住都要。
暫時都要。
有冇試過通宵啊？你話？
通宵都有。
呢度咧就因為冇香港嗰個勞工，好似即係類似香港勞工處嗰個單位部門啊，咁所以咧就我哋可以隨時可以加班都得嘅，唔需要申請嘅。呢度隨時可以叫開10點好12點都冇問題嘅，禮拜一即係加班啊冇問題嘅呢度，1個月開足30天都冇問題嘅。
There are no fixed working hours here, nor are there statutory holidays. Most factories start the day at 7:30. The majority of out-province workers live in quarters provided by the factories. At this factory, the rooftop has been converted to provide standard rooms for full-time workers and partitioned areas for temporary employees. In May last year, when fire swept through a raincoat factory in the town of Shipai, over 70 workers lost their lives. Our escort of publicity officials from the Dongguan municipal government objected to our filming these workers' quarters, saying that most of them were not up to specifications. Even the Hong Kong proprietor of this factory admitted that problems existed.
石牌嗰個燒死人嗰度咧，嗰單嘢之後咧，就佢都有嚟我哋呢度設廠嘅。咁嚟嗰度設廠咧就唔係即係茶廠啊。你茶廠咧就好彩我哋有2棟樓梯啊，一頭一尾有2棟樓梯，因為我哋個宿舍喺上邊啊嘛，5點嘅。咁咧就佢即係可以唔需要即刻搬走，即係俾個期限我哋。
A native of Anhui province, Wang Tin arrived in Jidigang with her husband Wang Fang 3 years ago to look for a job. She now works in the sweater factory, while her husband is an electrician at the power plant.
每个月你工资是多少？
我的工资开始做的时候是360，现在是380。
是固定的。
固定工资。
那么你太太？
她是多劳多得的。
平均起来的话，每个月都300-400块。
安徽这个电工每个月赚多少？
最多70块钱。
40块钱。
哎，最多是那样。
那么做什么行业最好？
做什么行业都不很捞钱的那里，他一个对外不开放嘛，那里比较远还偏僻。
Zhou Guoliang and his wife, both from Hunan, work at the sweater factory and together make more than 1,000 yuan a month, including overtime pay. They hope to earn as much as possible so that one day they can return to Hunan and start a small business.
你想赚钱，肯定要辛苦，不辛苦怎么赚钱呢？是不是啊？不可哪里有钱的？
是不加班是用不用扣钱啊？
扣肯定的嘛，你不扣钱，那人家都不去加班了。
怎样扣？
或者你不去上班，可能是扣几块钱吧。
In Jidigang, there's no entertainment to speak of in the evenings. Everyone works 7 days a week and enjoys only 1 day off when they get paid. Some factories may show a movie on payday as a benefit. Normally, overtime hours are from 7:30 to 10:30 in the evening. According to workers, they must do it.
唔得㗎，即係肯定要做啦，冇可能話唔做嘅。即係人哋唔俾你咁樣㗎嘛，你中意翻又翻，唔中意翻又唔翻，唔得㗎嘛。如果你個個都話請假嘅，佢都唔批准你㗎，肯定要佢翻嚟做㗎。
咁容唔容易請到假嘅？
好難啊，冇咁容易請假。
加班有幾多錢啊？咁加班？
加班費啊，加班費係2蚊咯，淨係加班費，即係你自己除付出前嘅做幾多就有幾多咯，加班費就加落去咁咯，
就每晚2蚊。
係，以前1蚊嘅，而家先2蚊咁咯。
Some Hong Kong factory operators say that Dongguan is like Hong Kong back in the 1960s. The workers demand very little. In return, they work when asked to, and they go on overtime when required. With such labour conditions, it's not surprising that many production lines from Hong Kong have been moved here. But there are also drawbacks for Hong Kong factory owners setting up in China. 3 years ago, this garment factory was established in the town of Wuji. Mr. Hui recalls that despite rapid economic development, the town lacked detailed planning.
佢設一間大嘅廠，但係佢嗰個去水渠嚟講咧係極之細嘅，細到令我哋唔可以相信嘅。咁好啦，到咗撈尾，到咗呢1-2年啦，周圍嘅廠不斷咁起嘅情況咧，每一個人都顧住自己，而政府亦冇一個限制，咁變成每一個人起嘅都高啲。而離高嚟講咧，咁我哋變成最低啦。咁啲去水喉咧又唔足夠嘅情況下，唯有就將啲水前播浸咗我哋廠咁嘅情況。
有冇損失？
咁個損失嚟講都頗為大。呢度嘅廠房一路起，而廠家不斷咁投資，而令到個電力嚟講咧負荷唔到嘅，呢樣咧確實係存在嘅。對面嘅電力站咧就係由村以及我哋廠共同購買咗嗰個發電機，而負擔翻呢間廠嘅電力，就我哋幫佢購買嗰個電力咁嘅形式。早期嘅時候咧就一日有電一日冇電嘅情況好嚴重，電力嘅唔穩定，電壓唔穩定，令到咧衣車經常會燒芒打啦，呢方面嘅問題係頗多㗎。
Worker mobility has also increased with a growing number of factories in the neighbourhood. Mr. Hui's factory already suffers from labour shortage, with more than 10 vacancies waiting to be filled. And because the local authorities want to control out-province labour, factories are finding it difficult to hire such workers. The Dongguan municipal government requires factories to obtain a temporary residence permit for each out-province worker they hire. This used to cost 25 yuan a year, but now it costs 25 yuan a month. Although this can be deducted from workers' wages, the government's control policy may well lead to other problems for factory owners. Another major problem is country of origin certificates. In the past, it was possible to export woolen knitwear to the United States using Hong Kong quota if the panels were knitted in China and assembled in Hong Kong. But since the 1st of July last year, knitwear assembled in China have had to come under Chinese quota, and usually Chinese quota are rapidly used up.
都係上半年或者7月份到啊用晒啊，差唔多。
點解咁搶手咧？咁學士咧？
就佢即係大陸配額能夠可以喺大陸製造，咁啊而且喺大陸嘅工廠做毛衫嘅工廠比較多，咁樣好容易就用晒佢嘅配額。
Wang Tingka says that all his production lines have been moved to China. Since knitting panels is highly labour-intensive, it would be impossible to move this part of production back to Hong Kong, even if there were problems. He says because the factory is just a processing plant, he doesn't want to break any regulations over processing fees.
如果我知道嘅咧，就知道係唔可以縫嘅咧，我就唔會同佢縫。
但係有
如果係
當時
如果唔知道嘅咧，咁又冇得講，係嘛？因為佢嘅貨係去邊度啊，我唔知道啊嘛。
咁但係事後你使唔使負？唔係，今日你需唔需要負嗰個責任啊？咁樣如果你唔知，
如果唔知道到講起法律上嚟講，都係應該要負責任嘅。
咁你咪有少少冒險。咁如果你係
又唔可以咁樣講嘅，盡量去理解咯，盡量去理解佢廠嘅嗰批貨去邊笪地區咯。
你講嗰單單有問題唔做，但係分分鐘有其他人都可能會做嘅喎，會唔會？
會，日頭會啊，日頭會啊，會有啲會平過你都去做嘅。
In principle, shirts and trousers that come under Hong Kong quota should be cut and sewn in Hong Kong. But some factory operators knowingly risk production in China. Plenty of such operations exist in Dongguan, and they are known as submarine factories. These plants handle the entire production process and ship the completed garments back to Hong Kong, where they are labelled Made in Hong Kong before being exported. A factory owner who exports to Canada and the United States admits that she follows this practice simply because she has no other choice.
即係最大困難就話香港人工貴，用香港成本接唔到單。咁如果我喺香港10蚊買條褲，佢喺泰國5蚊買條褲，佢咩原因佢喺香港買咧？同東南亞競爭，咁咪變咗我哋個成本要平過咯？成本平過就係為咗利用大陸嘅廉價勞工咯。咁我大陸做香港走貨，我7蚊得㗎啦。咁我無形中嚟講，我係咪即係可能香港貴啲會比香港做？但如果你譬如貴得好多，佢唔會俾啦嘛。
She admits that using such submarine tactics is a risky business, for she stands to lose everything if caught by customs.
呢個係一個好畸形嘅做法啦嚇，即係我而家做正行生意，但係搞到又要犯法，即係如果你心聲就係咁講，咁唔值啦咁樣就嚇。咁如果我接唔到單嘅話，我根本養唔到工人，養唔到工人，我間公司根本要結束。所以我自己嘅心態就話。到底幾時會揸緊到我哋唔做咧？未知。暫時嚟講咧，都係做得一日得一日。
Is the government unaware of the irregular way in which the Hong Kong garment industry is trying to survive? As the United States steps up restrictions on imports from China, it seems certain that Hong Kong's garment exporters will soon have to face another uphill battle.